I was working with Disney on Cinderella, and we were in post-production, and I just read Artemis Fowl because my nephews had introduced me to it on a holiday. And shortly thereafter, Sean Bailey got in touch and said, would I like to direct it? So I was new to the book, but was excited to kind of, for me, it was initially sort of like a twin project. If Cinderella was in a strange way a kind of coming of age movie for a young woman, it felt like this was a mirrored experience with a young man. So I was very drawn to these two projects as wildly differently expressed versions of the coming of age of young man, young woman. Eoin Colfer I met really early on when I joined, and largely it was to agree with him that he was gracious enough to give us his permission to be quite free with our film adaptation, to try and find the ways in which we could perhaps form an origin story that would definitely begin with his first book and the events of his first book, but that also allowed us some chances to borrow a little from the second book and make some things up as well. So what we had was his blessing, sometimes his involvement, but mainly his blessing to run our own creative course. And he popped in and out of the process, visited the set, and then in fact appears in the movie vocally in an appearance right at the end of our post-production process. He plays a newsreader, an Irish newsreader that explains very clearly that amazing artifacts have been stolen, possibly by Artemis Fowl Senior at the beginning of the film. So that's an Easter egg for the fans if they can spot which voice is Owen's. Keeping people connected to Artemis's personality as a first-time character in a complex story, and then interweaving the two worlds, the world of Artemis in present-day Ireland in Fowl Manor, and the underground world of Haven City, where the fairies live. And in those two worlds, how often do you go backwards and forwards from one to the other? How could we make sure that the audience were keeping pace with the arrival of all of these different characters, fairies, goblins, trolls, characters from Ferdia's immediate family circle? It was finding a clear way through that, not being too complicated, but being complex enough to keep people's interest. So it was a balance that had to be found. I guess that was the biggest challenge. Lucy Bevan, our casting director, began a search that was worldwide, actually. We knew it was a big ask for a young man, 11, 12 years, to carry a picture as he had to. Eventually, it was Ireland, really, that we focused on. 1,200 boys in Ireland were seen. And over 9 months, Ferdia maintained a sense of humor about the whole process, which in itself was good evidence of his stamina for making the film. And we knew him to be a passionate enthusiast for the books themselves. He was encyclopedic in his knowledge of the character, and he was open to all our tests of his physical dexterity and his acting performance, his ability to cope with sharing the screen with Judi Dench or Josh Gad or whatever. And generally his assurance, not overconfidence, but his assurance was what marked him out, and that extra humorous, compelling, charismatic quality that has him be such a sort of arresting screen presence. But patience throughout a long, difficult process was a big part of knowing that it was him. We wanted wherever we could to surprise people with what we were doing on film. We knew that Root's irascibility as a character and also great leadership skills and drive was something that we wanted to keep in the story. That was pure Owen. But a surprise would certainly be provided if you cast Judi Dench as an 840-year-old fairy. She loves surprising the audience, doing parts that she's never done before. And when we asked her to do this, she loved and relished the idea of how very different it was. An Irish accent, pixie ears, green uniform, and the capacity to pilot your own flying machines. She found that irresistible. Well, if you're a commander, you get to go around Haven City on one of those segways. What a late husband used to refer to Judy, rather, he would say, Every morning is Christmas morning with Judy." When the segway came on set and she said, "Can I drive that? Is that me?" She couldn't be kept away from it. In fact, I think she still has it. It may have kept her sane in lockdown. So it was possible to shoot in a way that led inside and outside, connected the two, made you feel a reality, which we felt was very important, and authenticity, which was super necessary in a movie that was so full of fantasy. We wanted to root the human part of it in something architecturally very convincing. And it also allowed us to do things like filling the library with books that our characters and our actors liked. So everything in that house was sort of owned. It was part of giving the Fowl family part of the story as much sort of under the skin believability and genuineness as possible. So it was another character in the movie that we wanted to portray in as great a detail as the actual acting performances themselves.